Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. I'm back with more boxing news. Now, I was watching Marcos Maidana versus Victor Ortiz the other day and reminded how tough Marcos Maidana was as a boxer. That fight, he actually showed a lot of heart and showed that once he gets hurt, he's more dangerous, which is usually the opposite for boxers. Usually, after you stagger them or you hurt them, it's pretty much a countdown to when they're going down. But not the same for Marcos Maidana because a lot of fighters pride themselves on not hitting the canvas or not being hurt and things like that. But that's not the true measure of a fighter. The true measure of a fighter is what can you do in adversity? What can you do when the chips are against you? What can you do when you're down on the scorecards, but you're still fighting and you're still, you can still get a knockout and you can still get a stoppage, even though the tables were turned against you initially. And we know Marcos Maidana had the heart that most fighters don't have, especially in this era. He never quit, even when it looked bad for him or looked terrible for him. But he had this rare trait that most fighters don't have, and that's hard, and that's the will to win. And it seemed like for him, it wasn't about the money, at least not until the end of his career after he fought Mayweather twice and got, the biggest bags of his life that he had ever seen. But um, he only had 40 fights and he retired way earlier. And I believe the Mayweather fights were the cause of him retiring early because he saw a lot of money they never saw. He came from poverty in Argentina and he never saw this type of money before. So when he saw this money, it changed everything for him, and he was able to live his life the way he wanted to that he never lived before. But as a fighter, when he was fighting, he was the toughest fighter that we had ever saw, or at least had I ever saw. Um, but I think he gave Mayweather the two toughest fights of his career, at least that first fight. That first fight looked bad for Mayweather, being on, especially that first couple of rounds, him being on the ropes and him fighting Maidana's fight, which I think, some people think he was doing the rope a dope, but nevertheless, it didn't look good in the fight because he was taking a lot of blows that he never usually takes. And he was staggered on the ropes and it just looked like he didn't have a lot of fight in him. And he was the first fighter that I ever seen to actually cut Mayweather on right above his eye, and he had to fight through that, which he never fought before. Having the blood in his eyes and not being able to see. So that was something new for Mayweather. But in that second fight, of course, he showed him why he's Mayweather, and he actually outschooled him boxing. Even though I believe Maidana improved a lot as a boxer later in his career, he was using the jab more. He was using feints and stuff like that we had never saw because he was just a pure brawler. Like if you look at the fights against Soto Caras, and you look at the fights in Victor Ortiz and the fights against anybody fights that he had before. I want to say even the Broner fight, he was still a brawler, but he used jabs a little bit, but those Mayweather fights made him actually learn boxing more and actually study more. And I believe if he would have had that early in his career, I believe he would have been even better fighter. But we'd love to see that brawler type style, not all that moving around the ring. He was, he would give the fans what they came to see, their money's worth. The fighter now, Pitbull, I forgot his name, but he doesn't have a jab at all either in any inside game. So he kind of reminds me of Maidana, but Maidana was more skilled and it had more, similar heart to he had similar heart to um, Marcos Maidana, but he just not as skilled as Marcos Maidana was. Marcos Maidana punched a lot harder than the pit bull does. Cruz is his name, and he fought a lot better. Maidana did, but uh, that fight against Adrian Broner, we saw what Marcos Maidana was made of even more, and he showed him that this is a game of not just skill, but also will. And Maidana also, showed Broner that, it's going to be a long day if you think you can just show up against me. Because even though he wasn't skilled as Broner, but he had more heart and he had more work ethic. So those who are more skilled, but you don't have work ethic is without works. I mean, without faith, it's not going to go anywhere. You have to be able to put work, have a work ethic with your skill because a lot of times, like those athletes that just show up and just think their skill will be enough, it's not enough. You have to have the work ethic as well. Um, when you think about the fight that Maidana had against Amir Khan. Now he lost that fight to Amir Khan, but at the same token, we saw the heart that he had because he got knocked down with these two kidney shots, and he got up, and then it was Amir Khan was running all over the ring, but Amir Khan won because he was more skilled. He was a taller fighter, had the jab. He was able to be get in and out of the fights or the confrontations on the inside very fast and get out of them, and that's the reason why he escaped. But he barely made it. But Maidana just showed you the skill that he has, whether it was Soto Corraz or it was Josecito Lopez. He got hurt in all of these fights, but he came back to even stronger in these fights. He won the two against Lopez and, of course, against the Corraz, but he showed that he was more than just a street brawler. He had heart as well, and he had the will to win. And it was about nothing more than that. Now, the only thing I hate about Maidana's career is he didn't get a chance to fight some of the fighters today. I want to see him against a Tank Davis or Earl Spence or Terrence Crawford. Um, and I don't know. I know he wouldn't have got knocked out by these fighters, but I'm not too sure if he wouldn't have hurt these fighters in a way that they had never been hurt before, especially against a Tank because they're around the same size. Now he would have probably had a problem with Terrence Crawford because he's an actual fighter and very skillful and he's fast. So I think he would have had a tough time because Mayweather, I think, would have had a tough time with Terrence Crawford as well. But unfortunately, we won't ever see that fight. But we will see the Terrence Crawford and the Canelo Alvarez fight next month. So I'm excited to see that. But tell me, what are your thoughts about Marcos Maidana as a fighter? And until next time, I'll see you next time.